What's up everybody, it's been a minute. I'm making this video because I just got the new Akai EWI, which is called the EWI Solo. It's actually not super new at this point, but it did take my local music store a while to get it in, but I've got it now, so I've been playing with it and testing it for a couple days now, so I figured I'd give you my thoughts on the instrument and talk about how it compares to the other wind synths that I play. Before I get into it though, I feel like I should take a sec to lay out my biases. That way you can take my opinions with a grain of salt and maybe have a better idea about what may or may not apply to you if you're considering picking up one of these instruments for yourself. So real quick, I'm a sax player primarily, but I also play a bunch of other instruments as well. I've been playing wind synths for about 7 years now, and I only really have experience with the akai models. I've played aerophones and Silphios in music stores briefly, but I've never really spent any time with them. Furthermore, this is not an advertisement. I am not being paid by Akai, and they did not provide me with this instrument. Alright, let's get into it. So something that's always important to consider is how does the instrument feel to play? Well, I think that this instrument feels pretty good. I really like the bent neck, which is unique among the Akai instruments that are currently in production. It makes the instrument significantly more comfortable to hold and to play, and it makes it work better with a neck strap as well. So back when the EWI 5000 was my main wind synth, I ended up modifying my neck strap situation a lot for two reasons. The first is that the neck strap ring unfortunately fell off of my 5000 after about maybe 2 years of use, which was a little disappointing, but after making a new neck strap loop quite a bit higher up, I found that the balance of the instrument was a lot better. By the way, I talk about that modification a little bit in this video if you're curious to check it out a little bit more. So I'm hoping that the EWI Solo is a little bit better constructed and won't fall apart the way that my 5000 did, because I mostly like the way that the instrument is balanced when I'm using it with a neck strap, and I feel like the bend in the neck is a huge help as far as that's concerned. The other main difference in shape is of course the length. Now, as you can see, it's pretty long. I think this is a bad thing, just out of principle. I think that a MIDI wind controller like this should be as small as possible while still being comfortable to hold and to play. Bigger instruments are harder to transport, they're harder to find storage solutions for, and they're harder to play comfortably on a small stage. If you're a touring musician, then a needlessly large instrument is a bit of a slap in the face. So part of the reason why the EWI Solo is so long is because of the speaker, which is a feature of the instrument that I personally don't like that much. For one thing, it's quieter than every other instrument that I play, except for maybe the recorder. Not only that, but it's barely even capable of representing the notes in like the bottom 2 octaves of the instrument. To be fair though, if this speaker was capable of doing the low register of the EWI any justice, it would have to be significantly heavier, which I think would be an even bigger problem. Now look, I totally get why Akai added a speaker. It makes it so that somebody who doesn't know that much about music technology can pick up the instrument and play it without having to buy an amp or deal with headphones or whatever. So it lowers the barrier to entry and makes for a more convenient experience, and truthfully, I think that's a really good thing. Something that I love about this model is that it's the most accessible for new wind synth players, and I would absolutely love it if there were more wind synth players out there in the world. Unfortunately, the speaker as it currently exists on this instrument is a little bit less than ideal, partly because it makes the instrument much bigger than I think it should be, but also because, in my opinion, it just doesn't sound very good. It's also not very loud. I'm worried that if somebody used this speaker all the time, they would play as loudly as possible just to be heard and miss out on all the beautiful expression that this instrument is capable of. Anyway, if someone were to play this instrument in an ensemble setting, they would absolutely need some sort of amplification. And by the way, for everyone asking if they can just play the speaker into a microphone, here's why that's not a good idea. But anyway, I don't really think the speaker is here for performances. That's why the instrument has a 1/4 inch line out jack. It's really here to make the instrument more convenient to practice or to play at home. So here's how I would think about providing this solution in a more practical way. Instead of having a pretty mediocre speaker on the end of the instrument that projects sound away from the player, I would put the speaker as close to the player as possible, maybe up here, opposite the control panel. Because the speaker would be closer to the player's ears, it wouldn't have to be as big to have the same perceived loudness to the player. This might have some other advantages as well. For one thing, it ideally wouldn't extend the length of the instrument nearly as much, but also any vibrations coming from the instrument would be picked up not only by the player's hands, but also by their lips and their face, which I think would make the experience of playing this instrument a little bit more like playing a traditional wind instrument. Anyway, let me take a sec to talk about something that I really like about this instrument, which is basically the entire back half. The OLED screen is a huge improvement over the super duper archaic 90s digital alarm clock that the 5000 had. The menus are well organized, everything is clear and easy to read and easy to understand. The selector wheel on the back is a really nice way to navigate these menus. When I first started playing it, I was able to quickly and easily set up the breath response just exactly how I like it, which really positively affected my experience of playing the instrument. By the way, the selector wheel has a really nice clicky sound and feel to it. Something else that I really appreciate is the location of the USB port and the line out jack. Having them here on the back makes it so much easier to set up the instrument. Something that I always found annoying about the 5000 was that if you're using it with a USB cable or a line out, you couldn't set it down with the right side up. You could set it down upside down with the mouthpiece cap on, but then the moisture drains the wrong way, and if you need to switch instruments quickly in a performance setting, the extra steps of like turning it over and taking the mouthpiece cap off and doing the opposite when you're putting it away just makes it that much more annoying. Now this may seem like a small detail, but if you're spending hours and hours with these instruments, then those small details add up pretty quickly. So one thing the 5000 has that I do really miss on the EWI Solo is bidirectional pitch bend. Instead of having a touch-sensitive plate on either side of the thumb that can bend the pitch in either direction, the EWI Solo just has a saxophone-style thumb hook. You can make the other pitch bend plate bend up instead of down, but that takes a lot of navigating through the menu, which isn't very practical in a performance setting. I think that for a synthesizer, only being able to bend the pitch in one direction is unnecessarily limiting, especially for a lot of styles of playing. Can you imagine if Akai manufactured a keyboard that can only bend the pitch in one direction at a time? I think this is a huge strike against the instrument, and unfortunately, this is a deal breaker for a lot of serious EWI players. Okay, next, I'm going to talk about the sounds. So sound is always difficult to talk about and describe, so I'm just going to do some demonstrations and let you make up your own minds about it. So that's what the emulated instruments sound like. Emulated sounds, like the ones that you just heard, make up roughly half of the sound bank. I'm not going to play them all, but I will put links in the description to a few videos that showcase more of these sounds. Now there's a whole ton of synth patches in the sound bank as well. For these patches, I thought it might be interesting to record the sound from the EWI using the line out jack as well as using it as a MIDI controller to control my VSTs at the same time. Doing this really showcases the differences between the way that the EWI's internal synthesizer and my VST synthesizer will interpret the exact same controller inputs. I'll be listening to the sound from the VST synth as I'm recording. The VST synth I'll be using is called the EWI, and it was created and designed specifically for use with wind controllers such as this one. So I'm sure you probably noticed, but the VST synth responds very differently than the built-in one does. It responded more to my breath, and it responded differently to my articulation. Just to be fair though, I'll do another take, but this time I'll listen to the EWI's internal sound. Maybe I just wasn't playing the patch on the EWI properly because I couldn't hear it. So here goes. So yeah, the EWI didn't really sound great that time around. So maybe testing and doing a comparison this way is a little unfair, but I think that we can all agree that based on this experiment, this instrument is capable of much more expression than the internal sounds would have you believe. Now look, I honestly don't care that much about the built-in sounds. After all, my favorite wind controller, the new Rad, doesn't have any built-in sounds at all. I just use it as a controller for my favorite VST synthesizers. However, I really think it's in Akai's best interests to give these instruments better built-in sounds. For one thing, I think that a lot of people don't really give these instruments that much of a chance because the onboard sounds are just kind of lackluster. And not only that, but as I just demonstrated, these sounds don't showcase how good of a controller this instrument really is. So I'm going to talk more about using the EWI Solo as a MIDI controller in just a moment, but first, let me say something really quick. I'm not saying that these are bad sounds. Sounds are just sounds, and I'm pretty sure that there are plenty of people out there that can make some really beautiful music with these sounds. The problem I have with them is that these sounds don't respond well to the player's breath, which is kind of the entire point of an instrument like this. Now, these sounds are customizable to a certain extent. However, in my experience, any improvement that I've made to these sounds has come at the cost of playability. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to use the preset Super Saw as an example. I could see myself maybe practicing technique in a hotel or something with this preset. However, like a lot of these patches, there's not a very distinct timbral difference between the sound being played with a lot of air and the sound being played with a little bit of air. So check it out. I'm going to go into the patch editor, I'm going to hit filter, go to resonance, and then boost it to 24.4. This is the max setting for this filter, so let's see what that sounds like. Okay, so we have a little bit more motion in the sound. Cool, let's play something. So I heard some pretty audible digital artifacts in the sound that kind of sounded like clicks or pops. Now that doesn't happen with every patch that I tested, but it definitely happened with over half of them. Some of them, like the patch Nice Saw, do this anyway without any additional editing to the filters. It even happens with the patch that I just demoed if I turn the resonance down to 12.2 decibels, which puts a little bit less strain on the filter, but it also considerably limits the expression. I think it's the resonance filter that is causing this glitch, but I'm not totally sure. Okay, so let's talk about how the EWI Solo functions as a MIDI controller. Bottom line, I think it's great. I think it might be even better than the 5000, but that could partially be because the 5000 that I'm playing on is coming on 7 years old and it's kind of falling apart. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to say about this. When you're using this instrument as a MIDI controller with a great synth or software plugin, then that's when you can really tell that this is a special instrument. You can't really tell when you're playing the built-in sounds, but the breath sensor is really top-notch, and it catches every little nuance that I throw at it. The response on the keys is really good too. I don't really have anything to complain about here, I just think that Akai did a really good job. So one thing though, the EWI Solo does only have USB MIDI. It does not have 5-pin MIDI out. This isn't really a problem for me yet, but it's definitely something to keep in mind if you want to maybe get one of these. So here's a couple of final thoughts. When I first ordered this instrument, my intent was to return it after testing it out and making this video. After all, I already own a 5000 and I can't imagine loving a WinSynth more than I love my new rad. That said, I think that I'm going to hold on to it at least for a little bit. For one thing, my 5000 is falling apart and it doesn't work super consistently these days. 99% of the time I'm using my new rad anyway, but I still use my 5000 to control my vocoder and sometimes when I'm teaching. I think the main reason I'll keep it though is that when people ask me which EWI they should get, I think I'm going to say that they should get the EWI Solo. For one thing, it's a lot cheaper than the 5000 and in most ways it's a much more pleasant user experience. For people who are pretty experienced with music technology and digital audio workstations, I might recommend the EWI USB over the EWI Solo, but one downside that the EWI USB has is that you can't send a constant breath output, which you need if you want to use it to control a vocoder, which is something that I've been doing more and more these days. Also, it only has about half the range. They didn't put as many octave rollers on the back, so yeah, that's a bit of a limiting factor as well. Anyway, if I'm going to be recommending this instrument to people, especially students or prospective students, I feel as though I should probably own one. So, is this what I wanted from Akai's newest wind instrument? Well, no, not really. It's pretty far from my ideal wind controller design. If you've watched any of my other videos, you probably know that it's missing a lot of features that I use quite a bit. Is it a good instrument? Yeah. Would I recommend it over the other two EWI models that are currently in production? Well, that depends. Akai doesn't really have a good one-size-fits-all EWI model at this point. Every instrument has its strengths and its drawbacks. Honestly, this is kind of annoying to me. I would like to be able to point to one of their instruments and say, yeah, this is the one that you should get. It's got everything you need. It's got bidirectional pitch bend, 5-pin MIDI, USB MIDI, nice sounds, compact frame, good shape and balance, easy user interface, accelerometer controls maybe. But yeah, unfortunately, Akai hasn't made that instrument yet. That's all for this video. Thanks for sticking with me. I hope that this video was helpful. If you have any questions at all, please leave a comment. I'd love to do a general Q&A video at some point, so questions on any topic are welcome. It doesn't just have to be limited to the EWI Solo stuff. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and peace out. Thank you.